Hello, folks. Welcome to the Genuinely Interested podcast. My name is Roy Bensby, and I'm your host. And I want to explain a little bit about the podcast before we start the show this week. This podcast is an opportunity for me to speak with some of the most interesting people I know that I can find on the internet. So, either with amazing talents or achievements or just unbelievable life stories or invaluable insights into areas that they have dedicated their lives to studying. I sit down with these amazing individuals from all across the world. Really, I've talked to people from Slovenia to the Czech Republic to Australia to countries in Africa and South America, really just all over the world. And I try to ask them the questions that will hopefully help you extract something valuable or learn something new or just get inspired by. And I do hope that you do get inspired by these talks with some sort of a call to action, maybe change something that you wanted to change for a while, or even just enjoy, detaching from the world for an hour and listening to some great conversations. So whatever it is that you get from this, I do hope that you extract something from it and enjoy the conversations. All these episodes are available on all the major podcast platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google, and the rest of them. You can also find the episodes on my website, which is roybensv.com. You can find a lot of other information about me there as well, from photos to a little bit more insights into who I am, if you're interested. And, you can always go to social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me there. I'm pretty active on both those platforms, although the only ones I have. And I try to post regularly so you can stay up to date. And also be sure to put your email on the website. I shoot emails out with updates, news, any new current information that I have will be sent via those emails and social media platforms. So yeah, make sure you're in the loop. This week on the podcast, we have Batya Ungar-Sargon. Batya is the opinion editor at The Forward. Before that, she worked in VinePair, where she was the managing editor. And before that, she worked for Tablet Magazine, and she's written for a bunch of other publications. You can also find her on Twitter, where she regularly posts ideas, thoughts, insights, articles about current events, and definitely give her a follow there. This podcast, this episode was recorded on November 9th. This is the weekend after the election, and it's still very fresh. This is going to be released the following Monday, which was going to be November 16th. So whatever happens between now and then, that is not something we covered on this episode, but we did talk about Biden, about Trump, about the current state of media and journalism, about the apolitical situation that Jews in America find themselves, or political homelessness, if you want to call it that. We also talked about the future and where this country is going to go in the next 4 years. We talked about COVID. We really covered a lot of issues. We talked about Israel. Yeah, I don't want to. It's going to take me a whole hour just to kind of brief you about all the topics that we covered on this podcast, but there was a lot of them, and you might not agree with all of them, which is completely fine. We don't have to all agree. All we have to do is be open to civil conversation, civil discussion, different opinions. And that's something that is a little lacking right now. It seems like if you don't have my opinion, whatever it is that your opinion is, then the other person is clearly wrong and should there's families breaking apart over different political opinions. So let's not go there. Let's all be civil towards one another, give the other person the respect, and be open to different ideas, be open to having conversation. That's the only way moving forward. There's just no other way. It's only through debate. It's only through conversation. It's only through free speech. So I'm hoping that you guys enjoy this episode just as much as I did, because I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. Batya is awesome. Her insights are amazing. And even though we don't agree on everything, that's still fine. I still had a blast, and I would love to do it again in the future. So I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Without further ado, here is Batya Ungar-Sargon. Enjoy the episode, guys.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
Hey, Batya.
Hi,
How you doing?
I'm pretty good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I've been following you on Twitter. I love and I read your stuff as well, but your Twitter is the main driver. I feel like it is for everyone now. And you have some maybe in another time it wouldn't be controversial, but now it seems to be things that are a little leaning to the right are super controversial. So I think you're in that category with a lot of other people, very interesting people as well, but they seem to be controversial when they really shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, it's also funny about Twitter. Like, I really appreciate when people tell me they like my Twitter feed, but it's also very much like a mixed bag because I spend a lot of time trying not to tweet and not to focus on Twitter because it's so toxic and so not representative of where our nation is at. But then people tell me how much it means to them to hear a voice sort of standing up for the things I'm standing up for in that space. So it's sort of like it's very much a mixed bag.
So you don't think the country itself is as potentially polarized as
Um,
as Twitter seems to make it?
I'll give you an example, okay?
Okay.
Abortion, right? We think of that as this hugely polarizing issue, right? 49% of the nation says they're pro-life, 49% of the nation says they're pro-choice. Start to drill down into the numbers. So 60% of pro-choice people, 60%, they only believe abortion should be legal for the first trimester. Now you look at the pro-life people. Over 90% of them believe that there should be an exception for incest, rape, deformity, and even mother's mental health. So what does that tell you? There's 80% agreement on 80% of the issues. So what do our politicians do? Instead of saying, hey, how about, a party platform that says it should be legal for the first trimester? I'll meet you there and you meet me here. We get the Democrats defending abortion until, the day before the baby is due. And the Republicans saying you're going to go to prison after the first 6 weeks, which represents nobody, that. So that to me is sort of, you see that on every issue, on the racial issue, on criminal justice, on every major issue. Look at Florida, right? Florida went for Trump and they voted for a $15 minimum wage increase. So why are politicians out here debating the question of socialism? It's not about the question. You look at the policy, universal coverage, minimum wage increase, less student debt. Everyone agrees on that stuff. And instead of actually mobilizing around these really important issues, you have politicians making names for themselves by taking the most extreme thing and arguing over definitions because it's a power grab. I mean, they don't actually care. Neither side really cares. But yeah, to get back to your question, I believe that Americans are way more united on the major issues of the day. I mean, on the culture war issue stuff, the Democrats completely won. I mean, the left won every culture war issue. And on the other front, so you look at the economics, I mean, I could get into this like in detail, but Trumpian economics was a protectionist economics, right? He really was sort of doing trade wars and messing with tariffs. And that's how he got up the wages for the working class before COVID, of course, sort of messed it all up. So all of the categories are scrambled, but you go to Twitter and it's just like they're acting like the last 30 years never happened. So
Do you think the left won the culture wars? Because I think if you look at the reason Trump won is because of that pushback. So while I do agree that probably there's a good majority because it's in it's in popular culture, it's in entertainment, it's in Ivy League schools, et cetera, but it seems to have a massive pushback, and people are kind of tired of it.
Well, so it depends what you mean by the culture wars. So on political correctness, people got tired of it. But people on the left, including minorities, like a lot of people got sick of it. So I think that there's like a lot of consensus among Americans that this kind of woke PC culture that's sort of devoted to grievances and things like that and policing sort of minutia and things like that, everyone's sick of that. When I say they're left on the culture wars, I mean more on diversity, on equality, on equity, on criminal justice, on abortion, on all of these, on gay rights. seismic shift on gay rights, on interracial marriage, all of these things that in the early 2000s were sort of the battlefield of the culture wars. The left has won all of that. And now the new culture war is around identity issues and wokeness. And you really see the media itself kind of waging this culture war. And of course, I have theories about why that is, that are sort of, vulgar Marxist ideas about who's benefiting from that. But they shifted the goalposts after having won all of these major victories that nobody will admit. No one will talk about the First Step Act. So.
Yeah, well, those were necessary, right? All those the culture wars back then, those were necessary. Those are
for sure.
We are all better as a society and as a nation for those things being achieved. And it's almost like, well, now we have nothing to fight for, so let's start making new shit up that we have to fight for, and we have to scream oppression, we have to scream whatever it is, right? It's like, I don't know, it's almost like we can't just be happy with achievements made. We have to always try to make something up or I don't know. It's a weird situation we're in, but we got into all this really quickly. I want to get into that a little bit later. I want to talk a little bit more about you. So give us a little bit of background. Where were you born? Why did you get into journalism, and why did you decide to cover the specific topics that you cover, which are sometimes, like we're going to discover later on, not the easiest things to talk to, and don't always make you a lot of friends.
Right. Okay. I'm from Boston. I grew up in Israel. I went to Tichon, to high school in Israel. I did service in a hospital. I grew up very religious. I'm still religious, but I wouldn't say that I'm Orthodox anymore, although I'm still observant. It's sort of a twisting path until you find the right place to land. I come from a big family. When I moved back from Israel, I went to college here, and then I got a PhD at Berkeley. And I moved to New York to write my thesis. And just because of where my partner and I lived, ended up seeing some things happening that I felt were sort of deserved attention, that weren't getting attention. And a friend said, well, why don't you write about them? And it never occurred to me to sort of see myself as a journalist. I very much saw myself as an academic. But there was sort of, I wrote a few articles, and there's sort of no going back from having people actually read your work, which they don't when you're an academic. And also as an academic, something that always bothered me was, you spend 7 years writing this book, this thesis. So what that means is that, after 3, 4, 5 years, 6 years, anytime anyone writes anything about your topic, you have to sit there hoping that it's either really stupid or really wrong. Because if it's smart or right, you're out of a job. And that's it's just a recipe. You can't be intellectually honest like that. There's no way to be intellectually honest, because your entire career depends on everyone around you not getting to where you got. And I was in the English department, so I was writing about 18th century texts that people have been writing about for 250 years. Like, it's quite difficult to say something new and important when people who are really smart have been on this topic for a long time. So I finished the PhD, but I really felt sort of drawn to journalism and the idea, especially that you come to each topic and you come in fresh, you come to a new topic and you've never written about it before. And so this could be right, that could be right. It just seemed like a way to really breed intellectual honesty. I started out as a freelancer. I wrote for Tablet for a couple of years. Then I went back to freelancing. Then I took a job as an editor of a wine magazine where I drank a lot of really good wine.
That's nice.
Yes, it was really nice. But it wasn't really very intellectually satisfying, I would have to say. If you got something wrong, if you were overtones of stone fruits instead of strawberries, 3 people on the internet would get really angry, and it just didn't feel sort of high stakes enough. And then I got this job at The Forward.
And you're happy there now?
We are the only publication that publishes Trump voters that is in the mainstream, like that is not a Trump aligned or right wing publication. And I'm really proud of that. I mean, that was a decision I made when I got there, that I was going to represent the full breadth of legitimate opinion. And that's become harder and harder. There's really a witch hunt out for people who believe in hearing the other side. And I'm a witch, I believe in that. And so I'm really, really proud of that, because it has gotten harder and harder. And to my mind, it's gotten more and more important.
Trump was great for the news, right? He was great for media. I mean, the amount of clicks he got. What are they going to do now?
Seriously. I mean, that was the whole game, was like hating him made them rich. Like they got rich off of hate. So Trump's name appears every 250 words in the New York Times. Like that's not an accident,
Yeah.
And okay, I don't begrudge any news organization that's trying to make a buck, but don't then tell me that you're being objective and that this is for truth, capital T, higher purpose. No, you're making money. And like, that's fine. I'm okay with that. We all need to make a living. But it was the selling of that as sort of capital T truth that I think really resulted in the where the media is at now, where people just don't trust anything they read.
Could we see a shift? And I guess we're already seeing it, but could we see it escalate to the point where Twitter, because I think what's happening is people do not trust media, right? The left doesn't trust the right doesn't trust the left. Nobody trusts journalists. I feel like they still have that trust, though. Like as an individual, people are like, you know what? Like I like what she says. I like what that person says, and I'm going to follow them. But I'm not going to follow CNN or Fox or MSNBC and all the other ones. And Twitter right now is the place where everyone gets their information. Could we see a transformation of media where journalists as independents will publish their own stuff via Twitter or via Substack or all the other things that are available right now, and media as just a corporation, as a business, will fade away at some point?
I think we are seeing a return to the partisan press. The thing that I think is really important is that, there's nothing wrong with a partisan press. The American press, at the time that it was most on the side of the poor and the disenfranchised and the powerless, it was very partisan. It was in this sort of golden age, like actually around the Gilded Age, when Pulitzer came up and was like, there was this disgusting inequality, which we are returning to now. And he felt like the newspaper's job was to be on the side of the working classes and the poor. And he was partisan on their behalf. And there was nothing immoral about that. I think the problem with today's media is that it is partisan on behalf of the elites. And to me, that's very much what this woke narrative is about. It is very much an elite narrative, and it is about protecting elites. And so I think what you're going to see now is a return to partisanship. You see this with Substack, for example, guys like Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald and Andrew Sullivan. Yeah, who were sort of excised from the mainstream media because they dared to stray from the partisan line that Trump is a Nazi or whatever. And they are gaining huge followings and making a lot of money. So Sullivan admitted that when he was at New York Magazine, he was making, I think, $200,000 a year. Now he says on Substack he's making $500,000 a year. So there's a lot of money to be
not a bad gain.
Right? There's a lot of money to be had there. It is a big question what's going to happen to the Times and NBC and CNN. I mean, Trump really saved their bacon. He really did in a big way. They've all admitted this, like off the record and in secret. And the New York Times is doing an interesting thing. So they launched this program called Project Feels. And what it was is, so for 2 years, they asked a group of highly affluent young readers to rate how they felt while they were reading an article.
Okay.
And then they created an artificial intelligence program that learned from all the data they collected over two years and could predict how a reader would feel while reading an article. And of course, the more the reader felt, they found the longer they stayed on the article and the more likely they were to click on the ad. And they now sell feelings to advertisers. So they will approach Cartier and say to them, how do you want your reader to be feeling when they see your ad? And what you end up with is a magazine that has, Angela Davis, Black Lives Matter activist on the front cover and a Cartier ad on the back cover, because those things go together now at the New York Times.
Yeah.
Right. So what they're doing, they've become like Facebook, right? They are selling emotions to advertisers. And they recently announced that they would no longer be collecting data from third-party aggregators. And everyone was like, oh, that's so great. They care about privacy. No, they have their own. They have enough. They have enough data from their 5 million digital subscribers to sell to their advertiser. Not they don't sell the data, but to sell out the correct eyeballs, the affluent eyeballs to the advertisers. They don't need third-party aggregators anymore. So I think that's really interesting that the New York Times has shifted to becoming more of actually more like Facebook in its revenue model. Of course, with subscriptions it added, and that seems really interesting. That's sort of why, to my mind, it's become so left wing and so identity focused and gone all broke for woke, right? Is because that's what it's selling. That's what elite readers want to read, and that's who advertisers want to advertise to. So they have really hacked a new way of doing it. That is instead of using Facebook, they've actually become a kind of new kind of Facebook.
And that's why I kind of go back on the point I was trying to make is I think that, when I get my news, it's kind of like everyone else. I go on Twitter, I see what's happening, what's trending, what exploded where, who killed who, what's happening politically. And I don't follow the Times. I don't think any big name in media, but I follow people.
Right.
So if Sam Harris says, you should read this, I'll probably read this. If you put out an article, I'll read it. I follow specific people who, in my opinion, are credible, in my opinion, are, center, or even if they're left or right, I still respect their opinion. And those are the people that I'm going to read the article they put out. I don't go on the New York Times and I just try to find something that I think is good. I'm looking for specific people to point out to me, almost like a curated, list of articles or videos or whatever. So I just think that's potentially the way forward.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as Israel, I want to talk a little bit about Israel. I'm from Israel. I know you spent a good amount of time there.
Where in Israel are you from?
So Ra'anana.
Okay.
And it's for the people who don't know, it's a little town. It's not that little anymore, but it's about 30 minutes away from Tel Aviv. And then my 20s, I lived in Tel Aviv, obviously, which is one of the best cities in the world, bar none. It's a great, great city. Is there anything you miss about Israel?
Ooh, yeah.
Except the food.
Of course, the food. When I think about Israel now, I think about it a lot when I think about sort of what's going wrong in America. I miss how communal it is and the health that gives to a society. Of course, a society that has a perceived enemy is also going to be more unified, right? So there's that as well. That is bad and negative, and the Israeli unity is all too often limited to Jews and not extended to, the 25% of the population that's not Jewish. But there's something there there is like a real health to the way the sort of communal relations where you have both the kind of nuclear family that, capitalism is sort of built on and that sort of health aspect where, a society can progress, but also a much larger network of communal relations that I think really makes people, it's something we've lost in America, and you really see like a society disintegrate when it does not have those relations.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because of size, like even if you're completely secular, most people go to their parents' house on a Friday, you'll have the, Shabbat dinner, and it's just, it's not for anything religious. It's just nice to come together as a family and have a meal. Even if you're in your 20s, even if you live an hour away, it's not a big country. So people, I don't know. Again, I don't know if it's the size or if it's the culture or if it's both. But here, if you're living in Boston and your family's in Texas, you're not traveling once a week to go see them. It's not happening. Even if in the same state, you're not traveling, it could be like a 5, 6, 7 hour drive. So I think just because the United States is so big, it doesn't, you don't have those opportunities here in the US.
And you can't go, like here in America, you go your whole life without, I mean, I happen to live in a Trump district, But I love that because I end up talking to those people every single day. Most Americans, they live without encountering people who disagree with them politically, and you have less of that in Israel because it's so much smaller, but also because people,
And we're so vocal.
very vocal, people intermarry. There's just a sense of, there's more of a sense of like unity and cross purposes even amongst people who disagree. Of course, skeptic could say, well, that's because all Israelis are kind of center right now. There's not that much to disagree about anymore. And like, I would take that as sort of, yes, that's true as well.
Do you feel more at home here or more at home there?
Well, I always felt like an alien in Israel. And then when I moved back, I also felt quite alien here.
Yeah.
But for a while, I felt really good here. And then the rising anti-Semitism of the last 2 years has really, it's been horrible. And it's been difficult.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of the first generation, my wife's sister, she lives in India now. Her parents, they're Indian. They came here. They were born here, the daughters, my wife and her sister. And but she's been in India for the last few years, and she just feels more of a belonging there, right? Like these are my people. This is where I feel. But she also feels that here in the U.S. And I feel like every person that comes as and they're the first generation born in a new place, you kind of get that feeling where like I feel at home in my original country, and then I also feel at home because this is where I was born. This is what I know. And I feel like it's just one of those things you're always going to have, that it's never going to be like, this is the place and this is where I'm just going to feel better than the other place.
Right. Yeah. There's always that alienation. Yeah. I will say, I do feel that Israelis do not understand American Jews at all. And that they often will perpetuate, like they'll make things worse because like they don't understand what it's like to be a minority. And so you'll hear them say things that are just like outrageous, but also, dangerous and problematic. And, siding with people saying anti-Semitic things, like not because they're anti-Semitic, but just because they don't understand the stakes, for example, of like when when Trump says, Bibi is your leader to American Jews, like Israelis like, oh, what's the problem? You're so triggered by Zionism. Da, 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 da. It's like, no, that actually is dangerous. Like it's dangerous because we're a minority here who's often, treated with suspicion, looked at with suspicion. You tell me the leader of another state is my leader.
Yeah.
That's dangerous. There is no Israeli that I know can like feels that or understands it. And they frequently sort of jump on the bandwagon of like, and that drives me crazy. Like, have a little humility. I'm not out here telling you how to feel about the Abraham Accords, Yeah. Like, I have humility towards you on that. Like, you know what I mean? It's sort of.
That was a weird one. I saw that too. I didn't understand it because again, like Bibi is just the leader of Israel. It has nothing to do with Jews in France or Belgium or the US or Canada, right? Like if you want
more than 25 seats in Israel, it's like, come on.
But there is, I think there's or I don't know, maybe there was back in the day. I feel like Jewish Americans, specifically Americans, they thought that, when they would go to Israel, it was this automatic thing like, oh, yes, these are my people. And at the end of the day, they're American. Like, it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Muslim or whatever. If you were born here an American, and it's not the same thing. Even for me, like when I got here originally, I was like, yeah, I've seen all the movies. I know the culture. I know how to speak. I have a bit of an accent. So like, but there's differences that take some time. There's cultural difference. Even to this day, there's still things I'm like, dude, this it annoys me, but it takes adjustment. Like it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many movies you've seen, how well you think you know. Once you live in a new place, there's just cultural differences that are just going to take time.
So what were your impressions of American Jews when you moved here? Like what surprised you the most?
That they didn't really care about Israel, I think.
Right.
Yeah. They're like, there's this notion back home where like, oh, you're keeping the land for them, and like they appreciate it. And if you're in the army, they love you. But you come here and they're like, because this is like, these are all the myths that you have back home in Israel. Like, oh, you go to America and the Jews will love you there. They love you. And then you come here and they don't care, dude. You're just one more dude. They don't care. And I get that. Why would they? Like, we're all people. There's no affiliation just because you're A, B, C, D. You're just another guy. I don't know you. You're a stranger just because you're of the same faith. And I'm secular, so I'm atheist. But there's just no reason to be. And I completely understand. But that was a myth that kind of blew in my face when I got here. So let's talk a little bit about our new president. I guess talk about the old and the new. You think Trump was good for the Jews? You always look at it as through this lens, right? Like, is this president going to be good for us? Are they serve our interests? And I wonder if what you think is Trump good for the Jews and for Israel? And do you think Biden is good for the Jews and will be good for Israel?
It's funny you say that because most American Jews do not vote with that lens. Like a small sliver do, the Orthodox do. I think Trump won with the Orthodox not because of Israel, that was sort of misreported, but because of religious liberty issues that the Democrats have been increasingly, to their mind, against their interests on. And that's objectively true. So they were really voting on that. To the extent that Hasidim, for example, who always voted Democrat because their way of life depends a lot on entitlements, reverted to the Republicans, which, by the way, also tells you a lot about where the Republicans are on deficit spending, right? They're not idiots, right? So most American Jews don't really vote as Jews. They vote as liberals, and that tracks with where they are in terms of socioeconomics as well. They live in cities. They're college educated. They have certain. So they vote like other Americans in that category. Although, of course, they see a lot of their values reflected back from the tradition. In terms of like the things like that. And so I would say, was Trump good for Jews? I think Trump was very, very bad for Jews. I think the rise of anti-Semitism on the right and on the left were really amplified under him. Not that he's an anti-Semite. I think it's clear that he actually likes Jews, probably, although he says things that are anti-Semitic. But
he likes whoever likes him.
He likes that is exactly right. You say a nice word about that guy, you can get anything out of him.
Oh, yeah.
Totally. But I think that he is a conspiracy theorist, and anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory. And the left, in response to his conspiratorial thinking, became extremely conspiratorial and thus extremely anti-Semitic over the last 4 years. So he sort of amplified this kind of, the incivility, the trolling that you see on the left and the right now, the kind of disgusting discourse that is now normal. That was very much kind of sort of normalized under him. And of course, I'm a little bit mind divided about it because I think that he also did make working class, uneducated people feel represented by being this kind of loud-mouthed, by refusing to play by the rules of the educated elites. But some of those rules are good. Yeah. So I feel very conflicted about it, but I think he was very bad for Jews. I think he was, in terms of Israel, look, before the Abraham Accords, I would have said, no, he's just enabling Bibi's like worst ethno-nationalist tendencies. Of course, terrible for the Palestinians. And what's bad for the Palestinians is bad for Jews and bad for Israel, in my view. But after the Abraham Accords, you just cannot minimize what a huge historic event that is. I mean, there's no going back from that. And I am of the view that makes Israel more likely to make concessions to the Palestinians, not less likely. And giving Israel that position of security, I hope, will help to mitigate the trauma of the Second Intifada, and hopefully will, progress towards peace. And I think that Biden is a person who could do that because he has such a reputation as a friend to Israel. Both him and Kamala Harris have strong pro-Israel credibility. And I could see them building on the Abraham Accords, perhaps even with Saudi Arabia, and making something happen for the Palestinians. That is my hope and my view. I think that Biden, as a centrist, will be good for Jews because, centrism is very important for stability for Jews. It's very important for liberalism. And in that sense, I can't help but be relieved that somebody who's less has less of a penchant and enjoys conspiracy theories less, seems to be taking the helm.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a boring presidency.
Yeah.
Just 4 years of not much to do about nothing, just not a lot of Twitter rants. Just keep it calm, man. If not for COVID, does Trump win?
No, no way. I think he would have gotten much more of the Black vote without COVID and much more of the Latino vote. And no, the economy that he was presiding over, and this, of course, was barely reported in the media, except in the Wall Street Journal, which reported it like not very happily. The
Yeah.
economy he was presiding over was working for the bottom, as much as it was working, if not more than. So the bottom 25 percentile of wage earners had seen a 4.5% wage increase between November 2018 and November 2019. The top 25 percentile of wage earners only saw a 2.5% increase. So meaning his economy was working more for the bottom than it was for the top. And that's because, in my view, I'm not an economist, but what he seemed to have done was taken the Scandinavian model of giving a massive corporate tax cut in the beginning and boiling that up with sort of protectionist policies like the new NAFTA, the USMCA, which was amazing for the auto industry. I mean, really revitalized it. And the trade war with China, which, hasn't borne fruits yet, but people looking down the long run, I mean, using tariffs, leveraging tariffs for the working class, like that's the kind of thing that Bernie Sanders used to talk about. And then Bernie Sanders voted against the new NAFTA. I mean, it's so funny to see these switches, and you don't see them reported because, like, the Republican press, they don't want to report on this stuff that's good for the bottom. They don't care about the bottom. And meanwhile, the liberal press, who's supposed to care about this stuff, they don't want to say anything nice about Trump.
Yeah.
The New York Times had one article about this, this 4.5% wage increase for the bottom 25%, just one. And you're like, well, why are we turning our backs on this? Republicans now are talking about the working class, talking about unions. Republicans are out there talking about unions more than Democrats. Like, what is this world? And then instead of joining them and saying, oh my God, great, I've been waiting for you, come on, it's like, no, we have to make up some stupid fight over some word, Yeah. So to get back to your question, I mean, with an economy like that was actually truly working for the working class, I don't think Trump could have lost. But it's complicated because it's like, well, why would we want him to? Obviously, like, we find him disgusting, but how can we, who are liberals, who are lefties, sit here and want the guy who showed up after Democrats had abandoned the working class for 20 years and was actually creating an economy that worked for them? Why do we want him to lose? Like, it is really weird because I did. But I think it's really important to say, like, it's complicated. It's a lot more complicated than they tell us.
Yeah, he's just not. The problem is you have this Trump derangement thing, and I get it, but people are not able to see. He could cure cancer, right? And people would still have something to say. Oh, he couldn't cure AIDS. It'll be like something, right? And I understand that, but there seems to be this notion that's happening in the country, and I've only been here 8 years, but I've been following American culture and politics for a good amount of time, and there seems to be a notion of I'm just going to hate what the other side is doing, and that's all I really care about. If he's sticking it to the other team, it's kind of like sports, right? Like, if I follow my team and we hate the other team, that's all I really care about. I don't really care. I don't have it, and Trump is the perfect guy because he's not driven by ideology or by morals or by ethics. He's just what's going to give me applause, what's going to give me. That's all he really cares about.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. I mean, he really was that kind of opposition. I mean, he stuck it in the, and they loved him for it. They loved him for the fact that he stuck it in the eye of, the educated elites, that they could not stand him. And he, but then, I mean, when you put that aside, I'm not saying anyone has a responsibility to put aside a guy who tweets racist things. Like, that's nobody's responsibility to do that. But if you do put that aside and you look at, like, the First Step Act, right? 5,000 men, 91% of them who are Black, who were released from prison because of Trump, can now vote because of Trump, right? They were put in prison by Joe Biden, who wrote the crime bill. It's like, who are they supposed to vote for? You're going to tell them that they should vote for the guy who put them in prison and not the guy who got them out of prison?
Well, yeah, there's a narrative that's happening that you have to vote or you have to talk it or you have to look up to people or yeah, there's a certain narrative you have to do things a certain way. And again, like he could, like I said, he could cure cancer. He did the Abraham Accords. I don't know, TikTok, all the things that you mentioned. He's just not going to get that praise for because of all the other things that he's. If he was just not as abrasive as he was, I think he could have gotten. He would have done much better if he just wasn't as psychotic, as much of an egomaniac as he was. I think he would have done much better. But he just can't let anything go. He's just so
Yeah.
self-centered, and everything has to be about him. It's just yeah, it's unfortunate. If he wasn't that much of a maniac, he probably would have done a second term easily.
Oh, totally. Yeah. 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 I mean, his need to be the center of every, news cycle was psychotic and definitely caused him. Yeah.
You know, do you think because usually and you referenced this earlier in the time of crisis, which is the majority of the history in Israel, people come together, and I thought they would come together here in the country with COVID. And instead, the exact opposite happened. People have been at each other's throats, more divided than ever. Why do you think that is? Because I would imagine the opposite would happen.
Okay. I'm going to say something like that's really unpopular,
Yes,
but
please.
well, there's a huge class element to COVID, right? Like, so for people like us who work from home, who have cushy jobs, the economy is basically recovered. I mean, I think it's sort of last I checked, it was like 1%, unemployment still lingering from COVID. The people who are still unemployed are, wage laborers, working class people, and small business people, small business owners who are losing their businesses, don't want to lose their businesses. There's a huge class element to COVID. And what you see is the Democrats like representing and defending the stay home orders, which benefits or doesn't hurt people like us who are their base. And the Republicans are out there being like, we can't let these businesses die. Like, take it as and the Democrats then saying, oh, but we're the party of science, right? After they told us not to wear masks in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Like the party of science, after they told us that like protesting is okay as long as you're protesting for our causes, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Putting that aside, I think there is a huge class element to COVID, and there's just a lack of compassion for what people on both sides of that class divide are experiencing. A lot of women are losing jobs because they're now having to take care of their children all the time, which they didn't have to. So closing schools is actually harming, women in the workforce. It's just so much more complicated. But I think that sort of the inability to have compassion for how somebody else is experiencing it's really like that divide. It's really it's blue and red, but more than that, it really is about class. And you don't see people really talking about it in that way. But it's interesting because in Israel as well, there seems to have been a failure to unite around coronavirus.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
what do you think of that?
this is more hearsay because I haven't been there, so I'm just taking people and what they're saying. But yeah, it I don't think it's united any place. I mean, maybe a few places that have done really well, but majority of the world, it seems to have divided more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a very weird time, and to the point you said earlier about who can be outside. When Biden won, or when they said that he won a few days ago, tens, hundreds of thousands of people all across the country drinking from champagne bottles, not wearing masks, dancing, just insane videos. But on the same day, or maybe the day before, I saw there was a video of this poor woman in this little shop. I think it was New York. I think she was like Hasidic, and they were closing down her little pottery or craft store with like three people. But 10, 50,000 people, that's fine. And
Horrible.
that shit just infuriates me. It's like you're
Horrible.
closing her down, but 50,000 people dancing on the streets, completely fine.
It's horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. That
And
kind
that woman is probably supporting like her own family of like 8 children or whatever, plus all the poor relatives. Like it's horrible. It's just
yeah.
horrible.
Yeah. That's the other thing. It's like they're closing down businesses, right? In the hopes or in the under the guise of this is going to save lives. But all these businesses that are being shut down, people are losing their jobs. People don't have income. People are alone, right? Especially elderly people that can't go and meet other people because they're scared. Suicides are going up, domestic
Yeah.
abuse going up. All these things you're not taking into account when you're shutting down business and you're telling people to quarantine. And it's funny because if you look at it was either Taiwan or Singapore. I think it was Taiwan. 24 million residents. They have like 700 cases and like a few deaths. And they didn't do quarantine and they have masks. Like, well, why can't we just take that model and use that?
And then they'll say, oh, we'll give another check in the mail. And it's like, a job is not about money, it's about dignity,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you're robbing people of their ability to have a dignified life. Like, they don't want to be going to food banks in their SUVs, you know, like they want to work. I think it's very interesting that you felt empathy for that Hasidic woman, because Israelis in general, I've noticed, cannot understand. First of all, is every word that's written in the Israeli press about American Haredim is just fanfic, I call it. It's just made up. Like, they just do not understand.
No, it's not all made up.
Terrible. Israelis don't understand American Haredim, who are so different from Israeli Haredim. They don't understand what they're, and the way they write about it, both in terms of COVID and in terms of Trump, through this Israeli lens, like, it's just so wrong. And I feel like I feel like I probably agree with you about a lot more. So I'm wondering how you got such a different point of view about Haredim than most Israelis.
I don't think, I think most Israelis are probably very empathetic to them. It's just, it's a very insular, insulated society that doesn't really branch out, doesn't talk to other, even Jews, like just regular Jews. They don't really conversate with them too much. It's just like any other insular society. It's almost, you know, cult-like in a way. But I feel bad when I see someone being marginalized. I feel bad when someone, you know, I don't know. There was a video of this Hasidic guy walking down the street, and they were like hurling insults at him and throwing stuff at him because he didn't have a mask. So I feel bad for, and it just seems like Jews, especially here, and especially Hasidic people, have been on the receiving end of much more insults, much more physical attacks in the past few years. So that's just not okay for any person. But the thing about in Israel is the Hasids they don't have to do what the rest of us have to do, right?
Right. Totally.
I have to go to the army. They don't. I have to work. They don't. And we have to pay for their kids. So that's the whole issue back then. And then, like, if you look at the numbers in Israel, the majority of people with COVID were Hasids, right? Yeah. They just didn't want to listen to the rules. So there is a lot of cultural, you know, butting of heads that's happening in Israel, which, yeah, it's different here. Here, they, you know, you have to work, like no one's giving you money. So it's very different, like you said, yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I look at the kind of political home that Jews have here, I feel like a lot of times they're politically homeless. On the one hand, you have the Jews will not replace us. On the right, the tiki torches, and on the left, you have the river to the sea, where they take up the Palestinian cause, and like you said, they put Jews and Israel and everything together in one kind of tied up bow. Where should they vote? Where should they go? It just seems like they've, and you said this, like they always voted very left, very liberal, very democratic. But should they? And I don't know. Like, do we need other parties to represent maybe the people better?
It's really funny. It's a really good question. So I'll tell you what the arguments for both sides are, and then I'll tell you where I fall. So the Republicans will say, the Democrats will say, well, we don't have people shooting up synagogues. You know, we have 2 congresswomen who support BDS, one who put it on a website, then erased it, not exactly support. And the rest of the Democrats are extremely pro-Israel. Meanwhile, on the right, you have a president who refused to denounce, white supremacy. He said there are fine people on both sides, and you have right-wing extremists taking up arms and shooting up synagogues. We don't have that, so they'll say, "Stay with us." Like most of us still love Israel, and of course, we don't discriminate against Jews. And the Republican side, they will say, "Well, but on our side, we disavow those people." Meanwhile, on your side, your little anti-Israel wing are the rising stars, and culturally, Jews feel the need to disavow their Jewishness or their relationship to Israel in order to exist in your spaces, and that's mainstream. That's a cultural thing that's mainstream. So you may not be shooting people in synagogues, but you love the people who hate Israel, and you're raising them up. So the Jews belong with us. So those are sort of the two arguments from both sides, and there's a little bit of truth in each one. This sort of identity politics at some point, and the bastardization of it, and sort of wokeness, and this new sort of critical race theory that's being mainstreamed through the media. They at some point decided that Jews were white, or that white Jews were white. Of course, they're Black Jews and Jews of color. Yeah. Ironically, the majority of Jews of color vote for Republicans, right? Because they're Syrian and Iranian and Cuban and from Uzbekistan, and they're not, big friends of the Democratic Party or socialism. But so that they decided that white Jews are white and have white privilege and put them in that category, which of course is you ask yourself, why is that happening? Who's benefiting from that? Why is that necessary for your movement to do that? Why is it necessary for your movement to obsess over Israel and boycott Israel and say nothing about the actual new Nazis, the Chinese Communist Party that's actually putting people in concentration camps and actually committing genocide and cultural genocide against the Uyghurs? Why is it that your focus is on this Jewish, the Jewish question, the Jewish problem? So I think that those are all really important questions. I run opinion pieces. I'm making these arguments on both sides. I couldn't say where people should vote for where they feel most represented. It's just hard to say at the moment. When AOC, commits to being at a Yitzhak Rabin commemoration and then pulls out, how are Jews supposed to feel about that? It's not an anti-Semitic act to do that. But, how are Jews supposed to feel in seeing something like that? Someone like Rabin, who represents peace, disavowing a past, he didn't disavow it. He always said, I am a soldier, I am a man of the IDF, but really, going from that history and becoming the man who's willing to partner with Arab Israelis, the first one to recognize them as equal partners, as necessary partners, that's now considered off limits. How are Jews supposed to feel about that? I mean, not good, Yeah. But then I think, well, how is somebody going to win a Senate seat in New York when you've made Jews feel like that? I don't know. So is it really a problem? Isn't it just Twitter? You know what I mean? Is it on Twitter? I don't know. It's too soon to tell, as they say.
Well, Twitter is the new reality, but it's funny you say that. When I feel when people criticize Israel and its government, and that's fine, you can criticize whatever you want, you have the right to. But when you're very selective in your criticism, and then you don't criticize, and again, this is the only democratic, liberal, progressive country in that whole area. But then you don't criticize, like you said, China and the rounding up of Uyghurs and putting them in camps and selling of the organs that they do. When you don't criticize that, or Saudi Arabia and Yemen, or all these other places committing atrocities, then I kind of have to think, well, maybe you don't really care about human rights that much. You just want to bash on the only democratic country in the region.
Well, I would push back against that a little bit. I don't know. I don't know that you can call a country that has an ongoing and pretty much endless occupation like Israel. Within Israel is, I would agree, democratic. All of the Arab Israelis have almost full rights compared to the Jewish citizens. It's not full rights, but almost, pretty much.
Arab Israelis?
Yeah, they're not allowed to build. They're not allowed to expand their villages. There's certain building rights that they don't have that Jewish Israelis have. There are a few. I mean, Adela lists 64. I don't think it's 64, but there are a few things that they are not 100% equal, but it's very very close.
Okay.
And it is a triumph for the area in terms of Christian Arabs, for example, like enjoy more rights in Israel than anywhere in the region. Like it's just a triumph.
Not even close. Yeah.
But I mean, but Israel does exert, military control over millions of people who don't have the right to vote. And so I in a larger scheme, I think, I think it's good that people oppose the occupation and they speak up about it. But like you, it does make me wonder when that is the one thing they have chosen. If somebody's Palestinian and that is their one issue, I don't hold that against them. You want to support BDS, which is a nonviolent movement. Great. You know what I mean? Like that's, over violence, I would pick that any day. And as a Palestinian, I think you have earned the right to do that because you have been disenfranchised by this. But when some random British guy, like this is the one issue he cares about, some white guy living in Birmingham, and this is the issue he's every day in my mentions talking about, it's like, come on, like the onus is on you to prove to me that you're not an anti-Semite if this is the thing that keeps you up at night, as opposed to every other atrocity happening in America, just like, in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had a Nut Wilf on the podcast.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, like this goes back, I think the reason Palestinians don't have a state is not necessarily because of Israel, because it's been offered many, many times, and they have been able to they would have been able to reach an agreement a long time ago. But
she's very, very convincing on that front. I have to say, when I read an article by her arguing that for the next 10 minutes, I'm completely convinced. She is very persuasive, but then I sort of feel like, my little liberal inside me comes back and says, well, the one who has the most power really has the most responsibility to resolve it. But I like her writing on that topic. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like there's no one place that's ever belonged to anybody forever, right? Like Jews are indigenous to that area, and even if not, like I don't even care. It's not like Americans are indigenous. The people sitting right now,
totally.
Texas belonged to Mexico. The whole West Coast belonged to Mexico. The U.S. were just like, no, fuck it, we're going to take it, and they took it, and it still belongs to the U.S. So that's just how things were. People came, they took locations, and that's just how it's always been all over the world. And when you live in a region, and I think this is something that they mix up a lot of times here and maybe in Europe as well. They think that whatever is culturally happening here in the US or in Europe applies to the Middle East. Like it's the same thing, it's the same values, it's the same history, and it's completely different. And you can't apply whatever's happening in the West to Israel. It's
totally. No, I mean, when they call it apartheid, that's wrong because it's not about race at all. It's about nationalism. It's about nations. It's about a conflict between two nationalities. It has nothing to do with race whatsoever. I mean, they're Arab Jews, they're Black Jews. It's not about race at all. But I also think that it's not really about territory. Like there's a thing that I think Americans, a perspective we can bring to the conflict that's helpful, which is they act like this is a territorial conflict, but to me, it's a civil rights conflict. Like it's not really about land, it's about rights. And I think when that's the perspective that a lot of American Jews have looking at it. And I think that if Israelis thought about it more like that, it would be less intractable. But I take your point about agency. I think that Einat Wolf's point that the way we talk about this, we take away Palestinian agency and we put everything on Israel. I think that's a really important one. And I think that is true.
Yeah. And I think that like you saw now with the Abraham Accords, like when Arab nations want to make peace, there'll be peace. I think like as an Israeli, there's nothing like when I was like, dude, I can go to Dubai, I can travel. This is amazing. Whenever you travel, even to Europe, right? As an Israeli, like don't say where you're from, right? Like hide your identity. You always have to hide your identity. Like I don't want to hide my identity. Not that I'm like some super patriotic person, but I don't want to have to lie about who I am. And I think there is if you ask majority of Israelis, they would love nothing more than to have peace with everyone in the region, with Lebanon, with Syria, with the Palestinians, with everyone. Like that's an overwhelming majority would vote in that direction.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I hope it's
Yeah.
true.
That's I think so. That's from my years growing up there. That's what I think. So you wrote recently an amazing op-ed. The title "The New Intelligentsia is Pushing Back Against Wokeness,"
Thank
and we
you.
describe this growing movement of African Americans who are pushing back against wokeism, BLM, critical race, identity politics, etc. What made you write that article?
Um, I wrote another article before this one about how I felt that we were experiencing a moral panic around race, that racism is actually getting like very rare in America, but we're acting like it's getting more and more. And there's actually a psychological study that shows that when you take away instances of something, people start to imagine that they're seeing more and more of them. And I think that that's very much what's happening. Is we're so used to seeing like horrific violence, we're so racism, we're so used to the racist history of America. We're so used to expecting it, especially with like the videos coming up on social media of police brutality, that we start to see it when it's where it's not there. And I think you've seen this in the discourse as well, where there's this new anti-racism, which is not about opposing like avowedly racist acts. It claims that the real racism is hidden below the surface among like well-meaning whites who think they're not racist. It's structural, right? It's not about what you think about yourself. So I wrote this article about moral panic, and the pushback was so intense. This sort of extreme, intense attempt to sort of shame me and silence me. The repercussions professionally were insane. And I just felt like I can't let this silence me. Like I can't let them win. My job is to say how I see it. And despite like all of the like intensity, I felt like it's really important to find avenues to talk about this that people can hear, because I'm not here to troll people. Something I learned from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who was recently Nifter, is that you can't get out too far ahead of the community you're hoping to influence. I think actually that happened to Peter Beinart, interestingly. Like he just got too far ahead of the community and lost the ability to influence. You can only influence from within, like from a place of compassion and love and understanding. And that my views actually over the last 3 years since I've been at this job have changed based on that, like based on the attempt to understand the community that I'm hoping to influence. And so I don't want to be out there saying things people can't hear. And I started to think about, how can I tell this story in a way that people can hear it? And it occurred to me to just tell the story of some other people who are making similar points, who are talking about how dehumanizing this new racial language is, how it sort of takes away your humanity by insisting on your race. And of course, critical race theory, they will always say we don't think race is biological, but they think it's inescapable. So at some point, it does not really matter if it's biological, if you believe that it is inescapable, right? So I've been following all of these brilliant thinkers and seeing that they were sort of in conversation with each other, but also very different on many different fronts. Each one had a different perspective that they were bringing, but to me, they sort of, I wanted to see them in conversation with each other within a single article. That's how it came about.
Yeah, I mean, there's some. To your point, I think it holds more water, more value when it comes from someone like Coleman Hughes or Glenn Lowry or John McWhorter, who are just brilliant. Like I found out about them only this year, and I've just been like consuming their content, left, right, and center. But it's one of those conversations. Not a lot of people, when Sam Harris does it, he's next level. The way he articulates it is amazing. But when it comes from someone within a community talking about the community, it's just so much better. I had a conversation with a few friends a few weeks back about the topic, and they were giving me a lot of pushback, right? And all of a sudden, it was like it started up just as a conversation between me and a friend, and in like 5 minutes, it was like five guys just like around me talking, and I was like. And again, like I was just having a conversation, but it got uncomfortable quick. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? Like, is it worth it? Like, what am I gaining from this?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gaining anything from having this type of conversation. I think that's what's happening to a lot of people. They're like, you don't want to be labeled as something. So you're like, just, you know what? Never mind. I'm not going to have that conversation. conversation. Let other people have it.
It's not just you don't want to be labeled. It's they label you as the worst thing on the planet, which is to be a racist, right? It's the
there's no going back. There's no coming back from that.
back, and that's why I mean it's so effective, and that's why. Like, can you imagine when the Democrats realized that they could label all of their opponents racist? Like, it's so effective because it is the worst thing you can be, right? It would not be effective if America was actually still a white supremacy, right? It is only effective because we now have a consensus among 95% of Americans that being racist is the worst thing you can be. And that's how you know that it's like it's a power grab because we all the only reason it has power is because we all now agree. And so but involved in using it as power, you have to act like that's not true. And that really offends me. Like that the kind of like who you going to believe, me or your lying eyes. The insult to my intelligence that I should have to accept this, you know, and it's really the only way to stand up to the Twitter mob is to deprive them of the moral authority to call you something or other. No, you don't decide what I am. I decide what I am, you know? And by the way, you don't even believe what you're saying. Like, it's just the that sense of being conned. And I had a real reversal because I was in the sort of woke category for many, many years. I mean, I have a PhD, okay? I spent a lot of time in academia. Like, that's just how you think. It's the bread and butter. It's the sort of the Hegel, like, master-slave dialectic. There's only oppressor and oppressed. There's no real equality. Every relationship is unequal, you know? The critical race theory model is like the whites have all the power and, you know, people of color, it's like, that's the bread and butter. It's the air you breathe. And I moved into journalism. And for a while it was like, okay, you know, now it's followed me, you know, because the journalism the media has mainstreamed these sort of very far left ideas recently. But I remember what it was like to feel that way, you know, to hang out with like Black friends and to only be able to see their race because I was in this sort of model. They didn't want to be in relationships like that. Like,
No.
It's so dehumanizing. And I think, you know, really exactly like you, becoming obsessed with these thinkers, with John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry and Camille Foster and Coleman Hughes and Chloe Valdari. Like, these people really are, I think, like salvaging the American intelligentsia and the public sphere. And I hope that they will continue to have more and more influence because it's really important to push back against this, not just as Jews. Of course it is as Jews, because obviously this theory is designed to turn Jews into like the enemy, not designed, but it's a big impact. But I think because as Americans, like, how can we subscribe to a view that doesn't believe in equality? Like, how can we subscribe to a view that erases the possibility of equality? Like, that is the whole purpose of this nation.
Yeah, it's also funny that I see a lot of, we kicked out the dictator, the authoritarian. But if all you've been doing for the last 4 years is shitting on him and putting out, you know, articles, videos, shows, SNL, just shitting on the guy, like, that's not an authoritarian state. That's not a dictator. That's the opposite of what a dictator is. If he was an actual dictator, you wouldn't be able to do any of that. So I just hate when they use words like
Fascism,
Nazi, fascism, all these things is just it almost loses its meaning after you say it so much when it has just nothing to do with the reality on the ground. But people buy into it, though. A lot of people buy into it. They're like, yes, we kicked out the dictator. Yes, you are a Nazi. It's tiring.
So what's your theory about why they buy into it?
I mean, you would probably have a much better idea, but my theory would have to be that we are, you know, did you see the Van Jones thing where he cried on TV the other day? I feel like we're very emotional. We react to emotion. We react to emotional people, especially now. Like, if someone's crying, it's like, oh my God, that gets 2 million hits instantly, right? Rather than someone just laying out the facts. So I feel like whenever there's someone's feelings are hurt or anything in that realm, anything that has to do with emotions, anything that has to do with that, people just react to it rather than the facts. A lot of times, like, no, he's not because A, B, C, D. That's just not as sexy. But I don't know. That's just off the top of my head. I would want your opinion. It would probably be much better.
No, I think that that's definitely a big part of it. To me, I mean, as a lefty, I can't help but see it through a class lens and through like who's benefiting from this, like who's benefiting from like the mainstream media, like mainstreaming these far left identity ideas like critical race theory. And I think it's that, I mean, tell me if you think this is crazy, but the reason that I've recently arrived at is like, why are these affluent liberal whites so excited by the idea that they are actually secret racists and that they're living in an unabated white supremacy, right? Why are they so into that idea? Like, why have they bought it hook, line, and sinker? And it's because they too don't believe in equality because they're affluent. And in order to be affluent, someone has to be poor or someone has to have less than you. And what a relief to find out that the inequality is not about them voting for people who are like neoliberals, but it's because of their race. It's something they can't do anything about. Like they're white, and that's why they have this privilege. And people of color don't have it. And there is nothing they can do about it. Like they don't have to pay more in taxes. They don't have to elect progressives. They don't have to vote for like systemic change. No, because it's racial, right? So I feel like in a way, it's providing this cover for a status quo that really works for elites, really works for the affluent, removes from them the responsibility of caring about the working class and the poor, and does so under the guise of social justice. Like by sitting there and wallowing in your guilt, you don't have to pay a dime more in taxes, but you get to feel like a hero by posting a black box on Instagram. I mean, to me, that seems like the thing that's really at play.
Well, there's a lot of virtue signaling, but I have a crazier question. This is just I probably shouldn't ask this, but if you can change your gender, right? You can change anything, and that's not only accepted, that's applaud, right? People love that you're being brave. But if you're, I forget the woman's name, I believe it was in Washington, when you try to change your race, right? If you're white,
Yeah.
you claim you're black, that's it. You're done. Like that's the end of your career. Why is one acceptable, but the other isn't?
You know, I don't want to, I don't have any good opinion or thoughts about, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about this topic because I think it's so explosive
It is.
and it's just so impossible to have like a reasonable conversation about it. I will say, I think that it betrays, and this is like not going to sound, I mean, I'm a bad feminist in me, but I think it does betray a little bit that we don't really believe that women are oppressed anymore. And I don't think I mean, I think after the Me Too movement, you're hard pressed to make the argument that women in America are still oppressed. I mean, there's still a huge gender gap in terms of wages, which is deeply problematic. But the idea that women are still oppressed, to me, seems like a hard case to make.
Yeah.
And I think that gap, maybe the difference between transracial and transgender, maybe is a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, as far as women, they've definitely made a lot of strides, which is amazing. But when I hear like they say, "Oh, women are oppressed here," like you should go to some countries where women really are oppressed, and those are the countries you should, and those are the people you should fight for. Like people aren't oppressed here, and if you look at all the really quote unquote, they're not shitty jobs, but shitty in the sense that they're extremely difficult, hard jobs. Those are all men. Men are doing those jobs, right?
But what's even funnier is that if you look at STEM, they're always going on and on about how women are not in STEM in America. If you go to the developing world, it's overrun with women. Like it's a majority of women in STEM, right? You go to Hebron, University of Hebron, right? Like, it's in the West Bank. It's not exactly like, it's a majority of women in STEM. And like, so when women have fewer choices, they're choosing STEM. And when women have more choices, they're choosing not to go into STEM, right? So what does that tell you? It's...
Do you think you would have done yourself a disservice, or it would have been better if you would have maybe kept along kind of party lines, not maybe write the stuff that's a little bit more risky?
Oh, that's a really hard question. I mean, I sometimes think like, I mean, what's the goal, right? Like, what is the goal? Like, the goal is a more just world, right? So I try to, but at the same time, as journalists, our mandate is a little bit in tension with that. Like, we're not allowed to be on any side. We're supposed to just tell the truth as it is. You know, there was a moment when Barry Weiss and Bret Stephens wrote an op-ed in the New York Times about a woman named Lara Qassem, who had been detained at Ben Gurion by that freaking, the anti-BDS ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And they wrote this op-ed being like, what the heck is that? And because they are so right-wing hawkish on Israel, like, it had a deep impact because they were coming out and criticizing. And that was one of those moments where I was like, that's how you have influence, is by, being the hawks. And then when you say, oh, the occupation, then it actually has a real impact. But I don't get to make that decision. Like, I really, as a journalist, like, we have to follow the truth wherever it takes us. And we have to say things like, so there is a little bit like a tension there where I think, oh, if I had not spoken up in this instance, I would have more influence and be able to impact, justice in this area more, but I think in the day to day, like, I have to steer, I have to be in the sort of ethical mandate of the profession. So, but that is a real tension, and it's a really good question. No one's ever asked me that before.
Yeah. I'm glad to be the first. What how do you see the next 4 years playing out?
I think
let's say we we cure COVID. Hopefully, 2021. There's vaccination. Gradually, people take it. What's next? How do things roll on?
So there's what I hope, and then what I think is going to happen. Okay. What I hope will happen is that Biden will he'll be quite lame duck because of the Senate, but I hope he will see all of the kind of protectionist, more lefty achievements that Trump has made despite himself, and will build on those with Republicans like Josh Hawley, who are supportive of those things. That's what I want. And I don't see why that shouldn't happen. But I fear that what we're in for is a return to the kind of neoliberal policies that have governed the Democrats, the kind of free trade agreement style, and that Biden will, turn to Mitch McConnell and will pursue that kind of, that sort of, match made in hell between Democrats and Republicans who just want to, who want free trade and don't really care about the working class. So I feel like there's two sort of avenues opening up, and I truly, truly hope that he chooses the first. The thing that will stand in his way is not Biden, who himself, is into bipartisanship, but is the idea that the left wing will not want to even achieve lefty victories if they have to couple with Republicans to do so. That's my big fear, is that there are these symbolic fights that will overtake what could actually be good for the nation.
Yeah, it's I was watching both the Bush concession speech and the what's the other guy? I forget the guy's name. The guy who's he was a captive. Mitch McCain.
McCain.
Blanking out. And I swear I almost got teary-eyed. I was like, this is beautiful, man. This is what it should be. Like, do you think we're going to get to a point again where they can, because again, like, there's such a division now. Are we going to get to a point where they just can work together and not hate as much? Like, just be a bit more united? The world needs a united States of America, not a divided States of America.
I really want that, but I have to say I don't want it at the expense of it being like a united front of elites, at the expense of our own working class. Like, so that to me is the real challenge. Is on the one hand, like, as a member of the educated elites, I am very drawn to civility and discourse and hearing from the other side, and like, and that kind of bipartisanship and that kind of like believing in the higher cause and all of this stuff. But I do hear the argument very much that this is like a marriage of elites, and like, who is being left out of that. And that in a way, Trump, in his rejection of that, was representing a forgotten sector of the American people, of the body politic, who had been ignored for far too long. And so I'm relieved that he's gone, but I also feel like it's important that the lesson that we learn be the right lesson. And so I agree with you, but also, have to put in a little bit of a kvetch.
I mean, I think the Democrats will do a disservice to themselves if they don't do a little bit of a introspective work and see why they're not connecting with half the population, with working class, with half the country essentially.
Yeah.
70 million people at least. They should do that work because, like you said, there is this idea of the coastal elites. And even though what was Biden 70? How many people Biden for? 74 million, 75 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. I like we said in the beginning. I think if not for COVID, probably Trump wins.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe 2024 it'll be Trump Jr. I hope not.
Or Trump again.
No, he's gonna be too old. I don't even think he liked this job. I just think he did this to spite Obama. I think that's the only reason he did it. He was surprised that people even voted for him.
Yeah, he seemed miserable, especially at the end.
Yeah, maybe Trump Jr. He seems a bit more of a lunatic, so who knows?
I don't know. Nikki Haley seems like she's on the up and up.
That would be good. Yeah, Nikki Haley. It's better than Trump. I think. I think any regular, quote unquote, regular Republican would do a decent job. He's just too much of a personality, too much of a not an ideologue, someone who just doesn't care about anything. I think people are tired. These past 4 years have been hard. COVID has exacerbated it. I think we just want some normalcy. So I hope that's kind of the direction that we're going to be going as a country. I hope, right? I hope. We'll see. So, Batya, thank you so much. Toda raba.
Oh, toda raba. It was so fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really had a blast. I'm happy when there's someone I can have honest conversation about everything, and I think this is what people should do. People should have open conversations, even if they disagree about everything. And that's the only way to reach conclusions. That's the only way to elevate the conversation. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
It was a delight. Thank you so much.
And guys, check her out on Twitter. I'll make sure to put the links. You can follow her, read her stuff. She's amazing. And thanks again.